Oh, awesome. This is your I think today. What's that?
Everybody, we're start. Hey, quiet in the house. Hey, quiet in the house. Quiet in the house. Okay, so tonight this is the first time I ever scheduled guests, and we're happy to bring on Peter Todd.
Hey, Kiko!
Right. Very happy to bring on Peter Todd. He works on projects such as Dark Wallet, which most people have heard about. Things like tree chains, which was more popular a while ago during the whole side chain thing when those were getting big. Tree chains is one of the alternatives. So I've asked him to come and talk to me, maybe explain tree chains to everybody, and then I'll move on to a Q&A. I'm sure me and other people have lots to ask. So Peter, if you don't mind, could you start off with maybe giving everyone a description of what tree chains is and how it relates to side chains, or as an alternative to them, and then maybe we can move into a Q&A after.
Yeah. So hopefully the audio's working well. I think I would describe a really, really top level way of saying it, which is kind of give analogies to the internet. And in a way, you could talk about sidechains as though it's taking the model of the phone system, where you have this sort of smart layer that has all the features built into it. To add new stuff, you got to go change that layer, you got to add it. And then the advantage is you can get away with really dumb terminals that interact with this, phones. Whereas tree chains, it takes the opposite approach. It says, all right, let's go build infrastructure that's really simple, it's reliable, and then you build stuff on top of it. And then you push all this intelligence to the edge. And what that actually means is, this has kind of come out of Mastercoin and Counterparty and other embedded consensus systems, where you say, we're going to have a system that's based on us examining the data in this blockchain that isn't trying to verify it or anything like that, it's just publishing it. And then we come to consensus over, well, what's actually happened? What's going on in our system? And tree chains is that publication layer in the same ways that for Mastercoin, the Bitcoin blockchain is a publication layer. For Counterparty, the Bitcoin blockchain is a publication layer. And I think that's kind of your basic summary there of, what it's trying to do. Beyond that, it's just a matter of optimization. The way to think about it is, in Bitcoin, everything on the blockchain, everyone who participates in verification sees it. You've got this one central repository of data, and you get maximum security because everyone has it. It's very hard to modify, all this effort's going into it. And of course, the problem with this is that doesn't scale. So tree chain says, all right, how about we go make a trade-off? How about we go say, maybe for some applications you need maximum security. For other applications, let's go scale it back. We'll go and have, say, half as much security or a quarter. And when we talk security in this, we really mean how many people have the data, how many people are verifying that this data was published when it was claimed to be published. And then delving in a little more, well, how does this actually work? It's kind of, if you've ever heard of merge mining, where you kind of have one blockchain that's linked to another, and you reuse the proof of work from one to the other. Well, it's kind of like that on steroids, where you say, all right, let's go have this binary tree of blockchains, and each step down the tree, the difficulty goes down. It's less work to publish data in it, but we also guarantee that only, say half the miners have that data, and then under that, half again, and under that, half again. And then the trick with all this stuff is figuring, all right, well, we can certainly create that publication layer. Now, how do we actually use it? And that's kind of where my research will be. There's some ideas about, with colored coins, for example, I can go and prove to you I gave you a real colored coin by showing the history of it. Well, with tree chains, you have a similar thing where you go prove to you that some coins you received on a tree chain system are valid because I give you this history, showing that step by step by step, yes, this actually happened. Yes, the money really moved the way it should, and so on. So, optimizing that, making it usable, that's really where my research is going, and I think that's kind of where the project is right now.
So how far along are you? And I understand you're trying to implement this into another coin, maybe Viacoin, was it?
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think it's fair to say that I'm approximately 0% of the way there. You know, this is just beginning. And, you know, I'm starting to do a bit of work on kind of infrastructure for stuff that would be useful for it. But, you know, that's, like I say, I just started, so this is kind of where it's going to be going through. And something I have done is I've made a real effort to kind of reach out to academics within the Bitcoin community and, you know, literally sit down over coffee and explain to them how it works, go through it on paper, you know, see if they can see flaws in it, you know, get people thinking about this stuff prior to an actual implementation. And, you know, I kind of want to seed the ground of people with this idea in their heads so that they're coming up with things I haven't thought about, you know, and I think we're going to see that going forward. Hopefully it's nothing that makes the whole idea not work, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, so you're part of the Dark Wallet team, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm official title is chief scientist, which is really just, you know, an advisory position.
So do you know how the development's going, and in the end, how much anonymity will the Dark Wallet actually offer?
You know, I think it's quite honest to go say it's better than Bitcoin as is, but it's certainly not up to, say, the really strong guarantees something like Zero Cash can get you. On the other hand, you know, we're not totally sure that Zero Cash is actually going to work, for instance. You know, Dark Wallet's a good stepping stone to that kind of thing. And I think in Rally you're going to get more than one solution. You know, equally like, say, if you were using Zero Cash. Suppose it turns out that we didn't understand the math and someone breaks it. You know, I'd feel much more secure if I'm, you know, protecting my privacy with, say, Zero Cash and Dark Wallet, you know, at the same time for something that really matters, you know, and having more than one option gives you that.
So this year, really, since the beginning of the year, we've seen a huge rise in popularity of anonymity coins, like starting with Darkcoin, the users mixing those,
yeah.
Monero with the ring signatures, and now more recently Bitcoin Dark with the teleport technology. Of all these ones, what have you looked into, and which one do you think offers the best privacy?
Well, you know, a lot of them are pretty obviously just coins with, like, CoinJoin capable clients. You know, I think a big category of that space is not actually interesting because they're using the altcoin just as a way to raise funds for development or for scams. Who knows? You know, the actual technology is something that can be done on Bitcoin. Monero and, you know, then crypto note technology. You know, that's interesting with the ring signatures, and Monero specifically hired me to go and do some review of their code base and, you know, help them out with like sort of high-level development stuff. And I'll see how that goes, but, you know, ultimately, like, I'm not that excited about so much that alt space because I think it kind of gets, you know, too tied into what look like scams in many cases. You know, and I've kind of stayed away from that and haven't really spent much time researching it, you know.
So what is something realistic, given the current environment, that you'd like to see added to the Bitcoin protocol?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, now let's go clarify. We're talking the Bitcoin consensus protocol, not, you know, the ancillary features you can build on top of it. Yeah. And, you know, I think kind of a sort of low-hanging fruit will end up being, and heck, let's say really low-hanging fruit, it'll end up being, you know, this something called check lock time verify that I'm working on. And for Viacoin, the idea behind implementing this is, first and foremost, just have a simple little consensus change that we can, you know, check all our procedures and make sure we actually understand what we're doing, really. And then secondly, the feature itself basically lets you author a script within Bitcoin where it is made unspendable until a certain time in the future. And that kind of is a very simple thing that goes and fixes one of the flaws of Bitcoin, which is you can go do the opposite. You can make a transaction that can't be, mined until a point in the future, but you can't lock coins. And it's sort of a piece of infrastructure that's very useful. One example is something I've been working on, which is to go pay to publish data. Whereas, like, suppose I have some data, I want to get money for that data, and I can go and set up scripts on the Bitcoin blockchain such that to redeem the outputs, I must reveal encryption keys to that data. And then I can selectively reveal, say, 10% of the contents of that file. You can double check, yes, this is really what you want to be getting. Now, if you decide you really want this data, then you go pay to the script, and the only way I can redeem the funds is by spending that money and giving you the key to the data. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a catch, which is, well, I could just not spend the money, wait, say, 10 years, and then I have this nice nest egg. Check lock time verify would mean that the transaction happens in such a way that you can go and get your money back, say, after 3 weeks, which puts me on this time limit where I must go and redeem the funds and uphold my part of the bargain. And ultimately, like, this is really simple stuff, but for Viacoin, it's a way to go test out our procedures, make sure we understand what we're doing, get our heads into consensus mode, if you will.
So same question, but what's something unrealistic that you would like to see added to the law or to Bitcoin that you don't think will happen?
I kind of want to go answer that question with tree chains. Let's be honest here, that's a really ambitious project, and in some ways I think it's fair to go say it's kind of a backup, in that it explores one option to making Bitcoin scale. It may never be that we actually use that option. It'd be nice if we had it, but I think that's close enough. I would say it's almost verging on unrealistic.
So you've been a proponent, I believe, of replace by fee. Can you explain what that is, why it's controversial, and why you think it's good for Bitcoin?
Yeah. So, first of all, there's different ways to view the role of miners in Bitcoin. One way, which I think the majority of the academic community and the majority of the Bitcoin development community say, is that miners act the way they do because Bitcoin creates economic incentives for them. It is supposed to be that it's in their rational self-interest for them to mine according to a way that keeps Bitcoin as a whole functioning. Whereas other people go say that, no, we have this notion of honesty, and miners be honest because, we can assume they're honest. And things that are dishonest they won't do because that's bad, and, it would obviously harm Bitcoin even if it's in their self-interest. And not that many people share this view. Some do. I think most people don't, especially in the academic community where they kind of see this is just hand-wavy bullshit, if you will. And what replaced by fee is saying, let's assume miners are rational, economically rational, rather than this vague idea of honesty. And right away, well, if I have a transaction I received, and then it's followed up by another transaction which conflicts with the first, but pays me, $100, obviously I'm going to say, well, screw the first transaction, why don't I go mine the second one and earn all this money? And the way the Bitcoin client works is opposite. It's always based on what transaction you receive first, which sort of looks like double spends are kind of hard, even before you get a confirmation. But the problem is not all nodes have the exact same protocol. So even without malice, or dishonesty, or whatever you want to call it, turns out it's pretty easy to double spend. And on top of this, goes against incentives. And I think it's much better off if we just, align the incentives properly, accept that this is the Bitcoin we have to deal with, and accept that to make zero-comp transactions secure, we're going to have to be more clever than to just say, all right, let's assume people are honest.
So a little while ago, you publicly sold half your Bitcoins when Ghash hit 51%. Did you ever buy them back?
Did I buy them back? No.
Okay, just
Yeah. No, that was you know, like that was part of an investment plan that I kind of set up in advance. It said, you know what, like I gotta have clear-cut decision points for when. All right, when do I get out? You know, why you don't want to go ride the ship to the bottom when you might be one of the people fixing it. So that was part of the plan of, all right, let's go make sure I have, you know, money pay for living expenses and whatnot, and make sure I'm in a position where if the protocol fails because of this, I can go, you know, have the luxury of time to fix it.
So no one ever answered the second part of this question, but who is your favorite and least favorite person in the Bitcoin space?
Who's my favorite person in the Bitcoin space?
And least favorite. That's the part no one answers.
Least favorite person.
Both. Favorite and least favorite.
All right, so for favorite, I think I would probably say Gregory Maxwell. You know, and that's just, he's come up with so many good ideas that are, you know, I mean, I'm impressed with his work. I mean, it's as simple as that, you know. And, you know, him and I have spent a lot of time talking about new ideas and stuff, and, you know, to have that kind of consistency and coming out with new stuff, I gotta respect that. Least favorite? Mike Hearn's a big pain in the ass.
Thank you.
That's what I was hoping for.
And, you know, he just consistently comes up with stuff that's indistinguishable from trolling. I don't care what his intentions are. It's indistinguishable from trolling, and it's pain in the ass, and you know what? It's just a waste of time. I mean, great example is a more recent one of him, like, going onto the Tor dev list and saying, you know what, let's not fix bugs that make it possible to censor hidden services. Like, I'm sorry, but that's the sort of thing a very sophisticated troll would do to waste people's time and have fun, you know? It's a Tor dev list. They are not going to go and implement censorship. It's just not going to happen, you know? And you kind of see this stuff over and over again, and it's just a big waste of time.
Do you think we'll ever see anonymity features be added into Bitcoin? Like, without having to use things like dark wallet or separate privacy coins?
Oh, like privacy features?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that dark wallet shows that privacy features already exist in Bitcoin. You know, the fact that you can have multiple inputs from multiple people is a feature. Now, what'll get added on top of that? Well, you know, I think it's not implausible that you could see some form of ring signatures get added. You know, there's some scalability trade-offs there, but it's not implausible. You know, I mean, you can go implement zero cash on Bitcoin without even changing the protocol, which is kind of interesting. You know, and it may be that that's more the way forward. That, you know, people go and mainly add stuff to Bitcoin by, you know, building on top of what already exists rather than trying to do protocol changes. But, you know, it's hard to kind of say.
What wallet do you use?
I would never trust a single wallet. You know, I use Electrum, I use Armory, I use Green Address, and then I also go and, you know, put some of my money in addresses that are controlled by scripts I've written myself. So, you know, between those four, that's probably like 95% of the money I have. Plus, then, you know, some floating around in Bitcoin Core wallets.
What do you think is Bitcoin's greatest weakness right now, or weaknesses?
I'm inclined to actually say 51% tax. You know, more in that it's not so much necessarily the way that Bitcoin would be destroyed, but such a clear way that it can be. And then maybe, you know, kind of tying with that is the way that Bitcoin does not incentivize decentralization. You know, currently the Bitcoin protocol does incentivize miners to go and become more centralized, which then leads to, you know, kind of goes hand in hand with the 51% tax problem. And unfortunately, you know, there's probably ways to go and incentivize decentralization. Andrew Miller, for instance, has done a lot of good work on non-outsourceable puzzles. But 51% attack thing is probably just something you have to live with. You know, there aren't necessarily good solutions there. I mean, I think the closest thing to a good solution is just to ensure that the proof of work that goes into keeping Bitcoin secure is something that a very, very broad spectrum of usages want to contribute to. And again, that's the idea behind tree chains, to go have this shared infrastructure that everyone's contributing to in terms of, you know, hash power security, rather than in the side chains model with merge mining, you know, having these little domains of security that aren't in sort of the suicide pact of we can't destroy, you know, one usage of side chains, or sorry, well, one usage of, you know, cryptocurrency without destroying all of them. In side chains, that's possible. Tree chains, you know, the idea is for it to not be possible. But even then, you know, fundamentally, someone can still decide, we got to stop this whole thing and spend the, you know, $1 billion, whatever it would take to destroy the whole ecosystem.
So speaking to 51% attacks, do you see a problem with mining becoming extremely centralized in power in countries with cheap power in the long term? Because already we're seeing that there's a problem with, you know, like I mine whatever coin is the most profitable for me right now, because I don't have Shaw miners, but I mean, my power is expensive. So do you see that being a problem in the long term, where all the mining just gets centralized in the few countries in the world with really cheap power?
I think that's actually not the case at all. I think what we've seen right now is not centralization of mining for power so much as centralization of mining for marketing. Because the most successful, you know, entities that have hashing power right now, they're successful based on marketing. You know, ghash.io is selling a lot of rented out hashing power to people who are not going to get a positive return on it.
That's right.
And how do you do that? Well, you have really good marketing, convince people to buy it, you know? And I think that will be a self-correcting problem. You know, that part of the problem, but you still have the underlying problems that the more hashing power you have, the more money you earn, you know? Fortunately, the difference is very small right now because 1 megabyte block size means, you know, the overheads associated with moving information around are small. But, you know, that doesn't let Bitcoin scale. And there's very strong pressure to go and increase that block size, which then makes all this stuff matter a lot more. And, you know, hard to say what's going to happen there. Now, as for power, I mean, keep in mind, like, there's cheap power available in all sorts of places. You know, there's a big, broad swath of the world that is very, you know, that are countries with very cheap power. And on top of that, you get opportunities to go use cheap power, like, you know, heating stuff. Like, I mean, let's face it, stealing power that you can get for free, you know, going and locating mining equipment by, you know, renewable energy sources that are free, except for the fact that you'd have to spend millions of dollars running a power line back.
Dude, that's fucking
you know?
brilliant. That's brilliant.
And it's happening, you know? There's a guy I heard about, for instance, that runs a bunch of mining equipment behind, you know, hydroelectric dam that's been in his family for, you know, 50-odd years or something. And they can't sell the power in a reasonable way because it's out in the middle of nowhere, you know?
Yeah, actually, one of my friends works in geothermal heating, and he says they're currently building a geothermal electric place in on a native reserve. And
yeah,
that means they can have, like, whatever, do whatever they want, yeah. And he knows I'm in Bitcoin, that's why he told me about it.
Yeah. Well, you know, my parents, they live up in northern Canada, and I've done the math. Like, it actually does make sense. Even though their power is like 30 cents per kilowatt hour to go and run Bitcoin mining equipment, because the only other way you go heat your house is by diesel, you know, such a fuel oil. And the price is roughly the same in either way. But with the mining equipment, you know, you end up getting a bunch of Bitcoins at that end.
So I guess within the last few days, there's been the Satoshi GMX email hack. Do you want to tell people about that and what either you covered or what you know about it?
Yeah, that was very interesting. I mean, bottom line is, I think it's pretty clear that what happened was Satoshi's email got hacked. You know, it wasn't a case of it expiring and, you know, the email getting re-registered. It certainly was hacked. And the strong evidence for that is simply that, you know, I got sent an email from 2011 that I checked with author that email, and it was certainly, you know, certainly something that was sent to Satoshi, and it hadn't been published anywhere else. So right there, you got, you know, 99% chance the hacker got access to the email account. Now, the other half of it, though, is, you know, these wild claims of, like, there are multiple people with access to the account, you know, or a guy trying to go extort 25 bitcoins to, you know, reveal info on who Satoshi was and stuff. And, you know, I think, you know, the most likely explanation is simply someone managed to go hack into the account a while back, had been waiting to try to get something interesting from that, realize that no one really sends email to it, and there's actually not that much intrigue going on, and figure, you know what, why don't I just try to make a story and try to get a bunch of money for this? You know, if he'd had a real doxing of Satoshi, you'd think at some point he would realize, you know what, no one believes it, so you're going to have to go get a, you know, some kind of escrow, some kind of provable pay for publishing data thing, and, you know, I just don't see that happening. And we all, you know, I'm not going to give exact details, but we came up with some plausible scenarios where his identity could be revealed and tested them against GMX, and, you know, we can't rule it out 100%, but it doesn't look that likely, so.
So of all these so-called 2.0 projects in Bitcoin, you know, everything from Mastercoin to Ethereum, what is your favorite and why? And then if your answer is Ethereum, like, what's your second favorite?
I'm going to go with the exact opposite of Ethereum. I'm going to say my favorite's colored coins because it's dead simple. You can explain it to anyone, you know, and you can do implementations actually work, and, you know, then you kind of build on it. I mean, I love the ideas of all this far-out stuff, but, you know, I want to see something actually get implemented. That's simple, it works, it's robust, and see, you know, what do businesses do with it. Because, you know, cool ideas, they're great for, you know, writing sci-fi stories, but I want to get paid and actually go change the world right now. And, you know, you do that by having something simple that can go to a company with a real business problem, say, look, we can go help you solve this, you know, here's how. I'm sure my answer will be different in a year, but for now, keep it simple.
You cut out for the beginning. Did you name your favorite?
Colored coins.
Okay. Can entropy be reversed?
Yeah, internet here is kind of sucky. But, yeah, so say again, rationale is very simple. Sorry, what's that?
Oh, sorry, was the next question. It was kind of a silly one.
That's it.
Can entropy be reversed?
Can entropy be reversed? You know, I studied just enough physics to know that I don't know enough about physics.
It was a deep sci-fi Isaac Asimov reference.
Yeah.
Do you see blockchain bloat ever becoming a problem? And what are some of the ways we can deal with it? I've heard of things like trimming the blockchain. Is that easily implementable, and will bloat ever become a problem?
I think there's a lot of caveats to that. You know, one of the issues with this pruning stuff is it certainly encourages people to not bother actually validating. You know, and as an example, like suppose everyone pruned the entire blockchain minus the UTXO set. You know, it's pretty plausible that someone would say, oh, you know, let's go and do something clever here and change the rules and make some money out of thin air. And we're probably not good at the point where that happens, but, you know, it's kind of one of those trust things. Like, you keep chipping away at the protections, and at some point you know it will break, and it's not really clear when it will break. And then kind of answer the rest of the question, well, you know, this is just a scalability issue. I mean, this is why I'm working on tree chains. You know, I don't think it's totally clear what's the right answer to this stuff. You know, tree chains is an option, but, you know, blockchain bloat is just another way of saying we don't like people using the blockchain. And I'd much rather have a system where the system itself is sufficiently scalable and has sufficient incentives in the right ways that we don't have to start trying to police how people use Bitcoin.
So in the past, I've heard you say that Bitcoin development is highly political. Can you expand on that and give some examples?
Well, I mean, I think, that's actually a really fundamental thing, which comes down to the fact that Bitcoin, if you want to get technical, the way to describe it is Bitcoin, the defenders against the attackers have a linear advantage. And by that I mean we throw away energy at this proof of work problem, and we know that's how big the attacker has to be to destroy the system. Whereas most crypto, you get an exponential advantage. The defenders put a little bit of effort in, and the attackers have to work exponentially hard against that effort. So it's very easy to come up with systems that are totally secure. Well, the problem with Bitcoin is then, where the politics comes into, is this security only works if everyone works together. How do you get people to go work together and, have consensus and have everyone working towards the same proof of work? Well, you start playing politics. And that's really the root of the problem. And, where you really see that is, I think the biggest issue has been still the scalability block size debate, because that's a fundamental trade-off between how cheap it is to use Bitcoin and how secure it is. And deciding that is not a technical decision, it's a political decision. It's saying what do we want as a community, what do we want to try to protect against? We can analyze this from a technological point of view to give you guys the trade-offs, but that's as far as technology goes. The rest is just politics.
You're answering too efficiently. I'm running out.
I've had a lot of practice.
So I've heard people like Gavin say the bottleneck on Bitcoin is sort of getting people to test pull requests and sort of review patches, that kind of thing. Do you agree with that? Like if a large company, say Google, came to you now and said, we want to help Bitcoin, what can we work on? What should we tell our employees to do all day? What would you say? What do you think is the blocking factor?
I think testing is important, but to go say the bottleneck is testing, I think can go give people the impression that we don't have any. I personally, most of the direct work I've done on Bitcoin Core has been adding more tests. If you go look at on GitHub what pull requests I've done, most of them have been adding new unit tests, better testing the system. And, to go talk about testing as a bottleneck, I think forgets the even bigger issues of, well, where do we want Bitcoin to go in the future? And for that, I would definitely argue the bottleneck is actually academia. We need academics trying to explore the space of where, how do cryptocurrencies work? How do proof-of-work consensus systems work? We don't actually know that well. And we don't have good options for what stuff we could go implement in the future. Whereas I think where Gavin's coming from is he's of the impression that, Satoshi's plans from like 5 years ago, that is where Bitcoin's going to go in the future, and that's a decided, thing. And we know. When the reality is we just don't. What Satoshi had in terms of ideas for what we could, how Bitcoin could scale, how Bitcoin could go work, how Bitcoin could, continue having incentives for mining. That's just some ideas, and very few of those ideas are going to be correct in, their first form 5 years ago. Whereas I think Gavin's of the impression, yeah, we have a plan, we know where we're going, and we just don't,
So you think it's more like we need elliptic curve wizards than anything else?
Yeah. At some point, we're going to need pilot testers testing what those guys implement. But if I had $10 million, I would go and fund research. I'd be giving money to universities to start up grant programs for cryptocurrency research.
Well, apparently one's going to be happening here in SFU, possibly using some Bitcoin, so there's that.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Well, apparently over here in Vancouver, the SFU university will be having some course that will be doing at least partially with Bitcoin and other new technologies, so there's some hope there.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I was at Princeton a few months ago at their, I guess it would be their first Bitcoin conference, you know, with academics, and I think that was incredibly valuable. And in fact, I should also point out an important part of that is us experts in the Bitcoin space educating those academics on how Bitcoin works right now. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of good work done on that to go make sure that they have a good understanding of where we are now so that they can start figuring out where we could go in the future. And, you know, having more conferences involving developers and academics is, I think, really valuable.
Speaking of academics, I wrote my master's thesis on Bitcoin security a while back. Kind of music.
Side note.
Yeah.
That's the Pikachu.
So,
No one read.
He's the Pikachu.
sorry, I think I completely missed that.
He's the Pikachu mod, and he wrote his master's thesis on Bitcoin in 2011. We all love him here.
Ah, good, yeah, for sure. Good on you.
Yeah. Jacob?
What is your outlook on most of the interest behind Bitcoin is either, 99% on speculation, on monetary value of it, and only 1% of those that are actually developers are mostly software developers that don't really communicate well in explaining the protocol in a much greater depth to other developers outside the scope of software.
Well, I think what's hard about that is I don't think we don't have a clear understanding of how Bitcoin works, in the way that we really agree on what are the fundamental principles behind it. And if you still have that kind of disagreement, it's very hard to then kind of build up the narratives and explain it to other people. And I think we're seeing those explanations improve. And explanations are just memes. And it takes a while for us to kind of hone those explanations till we can really communicate well. Whereas a lot of other explanations, people go talk about, economic principles behind Bitcoin and stuff. You've got a much wider community who can hone those explanations, which makes a lot more of the discussion and discourse be on that side of things rather than maybe, the technical side of stuff.
So what would be your opinion on that? Like, the majority of people that are interested in Bitcoin are unfortunately not developers. How do you think
sorry, yeah. What do I think that majority?
Yeah. So
I think they're essential to Bitcoin. It's so important to have people out there getting people interested in Bitcoin, even if they don't necessarily understand the nitty-gritty details, because that's how you go find the people who have the capability to do so and bring them into the community, as well as bringing in people who are then working on implementing stuff based on this understanding, and funding companies to get this stuff implemented and so on. You kind of got this whole ecosystem of things that have to happen to have that kind of balance to actually then make the sort of core development efforts meaningful. And I'll say, quite frankly, I think this is a real risk for the Ethereum project, because you've got this sort of core group of people with all these far-out ideas, but you have to be really careful to make sure this gets filtered through real applications, so you get the feedback on what actually made sense.
Do you think Bitcoin needs mainstream adoption to be successful?
No,
I knew that.
definitely not.
I read online
Go ahead. And I think what's even more important, though, is that for you to go and say Bitcoin obviously needs mainstream adoption, therefore we must modify it to appeal to the mainstream, makes it far more likely that you're going to end up changing Bitcoin into something that already exists, but worse. You know, the reality is Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, you know, banking in general, for most people, for most of the time, it works pretty well. You know, people like that PayPal can go freeze money and take money out of, you know, merchants' hands when they go and file a complaint. You know, you can only do that in centralized systems, but for a lot of people, that's a very good option. You know, and if you then change Bitcoin to try to appeal to that group, well, now you've got all the disadvantages of something like PayPal, plus it's got this decentralized baggage that, quite simply, is very, very expensive. You know, the one thing Bitcoin is good at is evading regulation and evading dishonesty. That's all it can do. Everything else is just a very expensive form of a ledger that you could always go and improve by centralizing more. You know, and the only problem with centralized ledgers is dishonesty and regulation.
Thoughts on the bit license?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Bit license, I don't think is actually as bad as what the European Banking Association or something. You know, they had a report recently, kind of proposing that, for instance, essentially proposing that regulation be applied very stringently to any blockchain-related activity. You know, as an example, the way they wrote it, it would be the Bitcoin Foundation, because it has social respect within the community, they would, by law, be then designated as administrators of the Bitcoin system, against their will, essentially. And then they would be forced into, you know, making Bitcoin then conform to anti-money laundering regulations, you know, consumer protection regulations, all this stuff, all this regulation that then matches, you know, what existing currency systems have. And if you start getting into models like that, yeah, I think it completely shuts down developments. You know, that doesn't happen in secret. You know, whereas at least BitLicense, like, they're hiding, in essence, that you know, that's probably their goal. You know, the European banking stuff, it's pretty clear what that is their goal, and they think that's totally reasonable. And I don't know where that's I don't know where that's going to go. You know, I mean, I think you can make the analogy to freedom of speech stuff. You know, you could certainly make an argument that something like Tor is just going to be banned. You know, privacy on the internet is just going to be banned, and it'll be a whitelist model where you get a license to go use the internet. Well, for various reasons, we won that fight for the most part. It's not clear that we'll win that fight for Bitcoin yet.
I have a question for you. My name is Nathan. So I read online somewhere, I don't know if it was Amir's blog or if it was Christoph Adams, I don't worry about this, but there was some talk about how Dark Vault is underfunded and hadn't really met its funding goals. Can you maybe elaborate on that, or maybe shut it down and tell me that I'm wrong, or let me know if there's anything that you're doing to mitigate that if you are having?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, you know, Dark Vault operates on a shoestring. You know? I mean, I'm sure if you investigated every cent that they, you know, received, you'd probably go find some stuff that wasn't spent on the right things. But overall, I mean, the reality is they're trying to do a lot with very, very little money. And, you know, they are paying developers. And they're not paying them very much money. And it gets really hard for their developers to, you know, live, to go eat. I mean, right now I'm off in London visiting Amir at one of his squats. And quite literally, Amir is running around, you know, finding dumpsters to go get the food out of them and go feed him and his developers. Like, that's just what they have to do.
So I heard you in the fire squad. What's it like?
Bit cold. not that much light. I mean, I wouldn't want to, you know, be in this position. And you know, I think the big thing too is like, it's so much work.
Is it Nosh?
1 sec.
Noah, can you just turn up your mic, please?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay,
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think like the big issue is, they're in a position of uncertainty. They don't know if they will have somewhere to live, the next week. Where they're staying can get raided, and they get kicked out, and now they have to go find another place to stay, and so on. And the fact of the matter is, they just don't have much money to go pay for anything. So yeah, I mean, if they had $1 million, it would be a lot easier. But that's kind of just where they are.
Do you think
whether or not you think. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think they could do things differently, or are they if they did things differently, could they have these funds, or do you think they're maybe sticking to their own values to the point where they're not willing to take money from certain parties, or do you think they could do something to not be living in these conditions? Because obviously it sounds pretty hardcore to the most of the Western world.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly would be easy for them to go partner with Circle and make Circle wallets, but they've kind of set these very kind of lofty goals, and I think the main things you could talk about doing differently is really just the marketing of the project and how they try to appeal to people. Amir's had sort of this very edgy, dark, if you will, branding. Maybe it's the case that having different branding would have been able to go get more money, more donations. But, I think either way, what they're doing has to be done with donated money. It can't be done as business.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm comforted by what they're doing, because you can't really threaten someone who already lives in a squat and is developing
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
They're untouchable.
Yeah, well.
The question is, would they accept donations if we accept some kind of fund?
Yeah, they accept donations.
I mean, yeah, they certainly accept donations. It's just, I guess the big thing is they're not going to go out and say, the Bitcoin Foundation, say, hey, can you go give us a big grant? I think it's, and hell, I've tried to convince them to do so. And, they want this kind of very community-led effort. Maybe it would be better if they did that kind of stuff, but, it's kind of hard to go say. And I think Amir is very ideologically driven there.
Can we get your thoughts on
I mean, if anything, I guess I'll say it fine now. I guess, if anything, what it suggests is having another project with similar aims to Dark Wallet but a different approach isn't a crazy idea, because then you can go explore both approaches at once.
What are your thoughts on the Bitcoin Foundation, and why are they horrible?
I think the Bitcoin Foundation is a really great thing. It's so good, in fact, that we should have more than one of them.
Fair enough.
What do you think of the utilization of GitChain and proposed stock markets, basically on for repositories? So coders could basically sell their work as a stock.
I think that's very hard to go pull off. And I actually visited the Tor developers at their yearly meeting a few weeks ago. And it's very interesting talking to them, because they come from, I think, a very different perspective from the Bitcoin community that's not so involved with money. And over again, you hear those guys say their experience has been that paying people to do stuff tends to backfire. It's much easier to go get motivated people if their motivation is not money. Now you need to support the people so that they can afford to go work on what they're doing. But when you tie the money too closely to what they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, it screws up the motivations.
Totally.
Well, yeah, it's monetary. How monetary incentive actually is a negative.
Yeah. Human beings are funny that way.
Of all the things you've been involved in the Bitcoin space, what are you the most proud of?
I'm hoping in a year I can say tree chains. I think right now it would have to actually be figuring out, the academic stuff behind how does embedded consensus work. What's a good model for this? That's actually it, because I think that was a big breakthrough in our understanding of how these systems can work. And specifically, I mean, I wrote a paper called Disentangling Cryptocoin Mining, you know, which I published a bit under a year ago. And I think that was a real breakthrough in the understanding of it. And funny enough, it came out of Mastercoin, I think. You know, looking at Mastercoin, thinking about how it works, was like, hang on a second. You know, I may have said this project's crazy, but there is this core nugget of actually a really good idea there.
Can you go over your explanation of tree chains again a bit? I thought it was a bit cryptic before. I mean, like from a user perspective, what would they kind of see and what would be the motivation for it at Apple?
I think all they would go see is that, I mean, if you're really talking about users, all they're going to see is that if they want to go use some cryptocurrency thing, you know, be it some way of moving money around, moving stocks around, whatever, they download some software, and, you know, in the background they see some of their bandwidth gets used up, and it all seems to work. I mean, that's actually what you're really talking about. Now, if you want to say users as in terms of the developers, well, from their point of view, what they're seeing is this piece of infrastructure that they can publish data on. You know? And if you can publish data and you prove that you publish it, that is the core element you need to, you know, make currencies work. And I'll tell you the reason why, which I think might help to explain it, is when you think about it, when you send a Bitcoin transaction, you are making a truthful statement. You know, this is a cryptographically verifiable statement that you really did say, you know, I'm Alice and I want Bob to have some money. You know, that is a true statement. The problem is, because money is in limited supply, you want to be sure that there wasn't another truthful statement already giving that money away to someone else, right? And the way we solve this problem is we say, these statements are only valid if we publish them in some repository statements that we can all agree on. That's the blockchain. And from that, you can build up a lot of interesting things. You know? Tree chains is just that layer to go do that. You know, Bitcoin is already a layer to do that. Tree chain just says, hang on, let's really focus on this core idea and let's make it scale.
So now that we've established that Bitcoin works, do you think it's important to keep the blockchain public, or should we think it should move towards the Monero route of having everything completely private?
Well, Monero isn't everything being completely private, you know.
No, I don't.
Monero as a technology has the option of you know, selectively revealing what you want to reveal. And then I would go say, on the other hand, yeah, you know, Bitcoin as a currency is a store of value. It only works if you have fungibility, and fungibility only works if, for the most part, most transactions are private. You know, otherwise you end up with inviting regulation.
So just in general, what are your thoughts on altcoins? Because, you know, obviously there's hundreds of them. Do you think they serve a purpose, or is it just like a testing ground for things that might be put into Bitcoin, or do you think actually in the future we'll see some altcoins succeed as currency?
Well, I mean, I'll say first and foremost, I think 99% of them are either scams or cargo cults.
Cargo
and yeah, well, think of it this way: the scams, I think it's pretty obvious what's going on. Cargo cults, I describe them as cargo cults because so often people don't really get how Bitcoin works, and they think, I know, let's make a currency. So they go copy Bitcoin. But they miss the central fact that it only works if it's in limited supply, and you get consensus to use this. You know, it's like saying, I know, the U.S. country is a good idea. I'm going to go and draw a line around my bedroom and say I'm a country now. You know, it's just not the same thing. You've completely missed the point of you need a large number of people agreeing that this thing exists. Now, that said, you know, there is this 1% that are pursuing interesting technical ideas. You know, CryptoNode is an example with ring signatures. But what I say to that is, well, my whole bit about embedded consensus is say you don't necessarily need to sort of split this proof of work effort up. You know, you can go and have everyone working towards the same effort, the same security, even if the systems you implement may be diverse.
So there's a beer fridge here, and I've been threatening to double spend against this guy for so long, but it's actually out of my technical capabilities. How easy would it be for me to commit a double spend on the beer fridge?
So, if you want this to be successful, get a laptop, go to github.com/peterslods/replacebyfeetools, download that. Go and then download my patched version of Bitcoin Core that has a replace by fee patch. Compile that and get it running, and then use replace by fee tools. And it's literally the double spend.py script will do it for you. You just tell I want to double spend this address, and it does it all behind the scenes for you.
Wow.
Tried a couple times till it works.
So would the success rate be based on which miner picks up my block based on which version of the core they're running?
Exactly. Yep. And currently, I think you're certainly going to have like a 1 in 20, 1 in 10 chance of the double spend succeeding, and probably higher than that. I mean, right when they were kind of minimum fee, I was getting like 90% success rates. And the network's kind of gone a bit more homogeneous is a way to put it, but you're certainly going to get a couple percent chance, and probably in the double digits.
We only have to run faster than the slowest camper. Right? You can easily just as easily download some credit card numbers if you have Bitcoin.
I just want to double spend for it. So, given that Shaw moved to ASICs so fast, and now there's like the Bitcoin mining scene is like, it's almost always been better to just buy Bitcoins. Do you think we'll ever see an algorithm change, or do you think that it's important to have an ASIC-resistant algorithm, or do you think we're stuck with what we have? And
I don't think we know how to make an ASIC-resistant algorithm. And basically, all our attempts to make an algorithm more ASIC-resistant make the problem worse, not better. And the issue is that if you make the first ASIC cost more money to make, in your NRE, non-recurring expenses, that means that the first company to finally get around to making the ASIC now has 100% lock on the whole industry. Whereas with SHA-256, it was such a simple algorithm that multiple companies developed basics in a very short period of time, so there was competition. I wish I could wave a magic wand to come up with a ASIC-resistant algorithm, but nobody has.
Okay, so has anybody else got anything? Yeah, a couple more.
I'm of the opinion that this centralization of mining that people talk about is a very transient affair, and it will just fade away as ASICs proliferate. It was like a moment in time when ASICs were concentrated. Do you agree with that, or do you see it just getting worse and worse?
I think it is, on one level, certainly a moment of time. On another level, the fact that it's all based on ASICs is itself a horrible centralization risk. Because, there's something like 3 to, at most, maybe, 6 companies in the world that can make, like, top-of-the-line ASICs. And frankly, the number is really 3. I mean, and that's a number that's going to get smaller. So if you want to control Bitcoin, you go up to Intel and TSMC and Global Foundries and tell them, look, Bitcoin mining equipment is now regulated. You're just going to have to play nice with our, with our government regulations and give us a list of who's buying it. Go build in backdoors to go shut it down if we need to. Go force blocks to be created that are, have to be signed by, government agencies. Like, there's not much we can do about that. And it may be the case that this happens. I mean, you got to remember, this is like Richard Stallman's warnings that you may see strong, digital restrictions management technology that makes general purpose computing actually no longer general purpose. And we've been lucky that the industry has pushed back on that, but ASIC mining is a much smaller industry, so I think it's much more plausible that it's being heavily regulated. And unfortunately, I don't actually have a good solution to any of this. It's still an open research question.
What do you think of what people are? I worked on a protocol that I think I forwarded you about a couple of months ago. It's still in long stages, but the idea is that you could conglomerate multiple different protocols, all protocols together through burn to have a wallet that uses multiple cryptocurrencies. You didn't mention the cost. Yeah.
I'm not sure I got your question there. You're kind of breaking up a bit.
Anyways, what is your thoughts on conglomerating multiple cryptocurrency protocols together to be more usable in general?
Oh, like you mean multiple proof of work?
Multiple currencies, whether they be the same proof of work or not.
Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry. Should multiple currencies be the same proof of work?
No.
Yeah, I think...
Can multiple currencies be built in these?
Just wondering what Peter Todd thinks about having a tool where you can use multiple cryptocurrencies very easily.
One wallet.
Yeah.
One wallet.
Right, like a wallet that supports multiple ones at once.
Yeah.
I know, sounds like something useful for users. Simple as that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with making it. There's certainly a market for it, and by all means, people should make those capabilities available.
So a while ago, you were sent an email about a white paper of something called Bitbasket. Did you ever read it?
Bitbasket.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've ever heard of this.
Okay, well, the guy who just asked the question, that's what he was getting at. So can you go back to your email and read it and respond to him? Because he would totally appreciate it.
What is it?
Well, it's a good thing he emailed me, because I do eventually read all my email. Every month or two, I clean up my inbox.
Don't worry, just do it for him. He's a good guy. He deserves it. It's a great idea.
Sure thing.
Okay, thank you. Do you think a state-sponsored 51% attack is a real threat?
Do I think Bitcoin was state-sponsored?
No, a state-sponsored 51% attack.
Oh, sorry, a state-sponsored 51% attack. I think it's a very plausible scenario.
Which state?
I think there's probably cheaper ways. Well, I'd say, first of all, remember that there are cheaper ways to attack Bitcoin than 51% attack. But, that is the option if they want to. And as for which state, probably actually one of the Western states. I get the feeling that your non-Western countries are more likely to go benefit from Bitcoin.
So you think
I think it's
like Peter, like America as an example?
Yeah. America, what?
Yeah, well, all right, so here's a plausible scenario. I mean, suppose, Russia starts using Bitcoin in a big way to evade sanctions. This will certainly turn into a military issue, and if they can't kill Bitcoin in other ways and, get the sanctions to apply, sure, I think they would do a 51% attack. It's likely to be a 51% attack where Bitcoin still keeps working for approved usages, but they can certainly turn Bitcoin into a system where you have to have a license to use it, and be explicitly whitelisted.
You just mentioned other attack vectors that were easier than the 51% attack. Can we get a list?
Well,
Nice try.
for instance, drone strikes against core developers, that's a good one.
Okay, keep going.
But, quite seriously, market manipulation is a good one. Go spread bad PR about it. I mean, a really clever one is to go and put investment money into companies that aren't doing good things in the Bitcoin space.
Double tax it.
If I were the U.S. government, I would go fund Coinbase, for instance. there's lots of clever, underhanded things they can go do.
So do you think?
You know, you could.
Do you think the American military complex is a direct threat to Bitcoin?
Yes, I think it's plausible that it could be seen as this is something where we have to expand our, cyber attack abilities. And I think your most likely scenario is, Bitcoin being used to evade sanctions.
Very interesting.
So,
Any theories on Satoshi? I mean,
yeah. Is Satoshi Nick Szabo?
Sorry, is Satoshi Nakamoto?
Nick Szabo.
do you have any theories?
I don't really care who he is. In fact, if anything, I like to go joke that if I were Satoshi Nakamoto, I'd want to be anonymous because I had such shitty code on version 1 of Bitcoin.
So we always ask this question: what do you see the Bitcoin price at the end of the year? We have a pool going.
Well, I actually went and at Decentral in Toronto, we have a similar pool, and I decided, someone's got to go say 0, so I put in 0.
That's why you're the best. If it's Price is Right rules, then you're totally probably going to win. Yeah.
And if you want me to go say statements that I'm happy to go put, at least go put a beer or two on, it's definitely going to be between 0 and infinity.
Anybody else before I ask my last question?
Alex, last question.
Okay, the last question is, why is Doge better than Bitcoin?
Well, I think because of a solid technical basis of competent programmers who understand the protocol very well. It has nothing to do with marketing.
Thank you so much for answering that seriously. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. You're my first guest I scheduled, and I couldn't be happier. So we have another one coming up. If you want to stick around, we have Coin Beyond. They do a 2 of 4 multi-sig wallet and a point-of-sale system. If you want to stick around and listen. If not, it's probably in the middle of the night for you, so you can maybe get some more sleep before the next day. Thank you for waking up at a ridiculous hour to see us.
Thank you.
And one round of applause for Peter.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome, man.